Okay, so we are starting our very first lesson in our very first unit, and we are going to be talking about rigid transformations. So I want you to think about those two words. When you think about the word rigid, what comes to mind? It's something that's stiff, it's something that's not changing. But then transformation is kind of the opposite, because transformation means I'm changing something. So what would a rigid transformation mean? That's what we're going to be looking at today. So if you look at our model, we read our first question. It says you can slide figure A to the right to get its image, figure B. And so they want us to complete the image by drawing in the side. So here we have all of figure A. And then for figure B, they've only given us two of the sides. So we need to figure out, what does figure B look like? And it's supposed to look just like figure A. So that means I've got to add in this side here and add in this side here. And that's not even close to what it should be, but just pretend. In fact, let me fix that. Okay, that's a little better. We're going to pretend that B looks just like A. So letter B tells us that movement that we just did, sliding to the right, is actually called a translation. So what's the same about figure A and figure B, and what's different? So what's the same is, if I did this correctly, it's still the same size. So I'm going to put the same, it's still the same size, and it's still the same shape. I didn't change anything about that. But what's different? Well, first it was here, and now it's here. So it moved. So what's a word I can use to describe the thing that changed? So if I'm in one spot and then I move to a different spot, I've changed my location. Okay? And there's something else about the shape that's the same, but we're going to get back to that because I'm not sure if you've noticed it yet. So now let's move on to number 2. And I'll switch colors for number 2. Now we have, they're telling us we can flip figure A across this line of reflection to get a new figure, or its image, figure C. So here's our line of reflection, right? And we're just going to flip it over. So if I flip it over, it's kind of going to be upside down now. So now here's the short side here, and then here. And again, the question is, what's the same and what's different? So the same, it's still the same size. It didn't get any bigger. It didn't get any smaller. It's still the same shape. I didn't change that at all. But what's different this time? So again, it's in a different spot. So the location is different, but now there's something else different about the shape, because I kind of flipped it down. The shape is now upside down. So when I'm talking about which way the shape is facing, that's called the orientation. So when I reflect it from A to C, it's facing a different direction. So the orientation is also different. So let's look back at our translation now and see, did the orientation change when I just slide my shape to the right? It's still facing the exact same way. So the orientation is actually still the same. One more type of transformation, and we've got some little visuals here, and that's for a rotation. So you can rotate or you can turn a shape, and that's also going to be a rigid transformation. So we have figure A, it's turned clockwise. Clockwise is the direction that a clock goes, so it's going to turn this way, and it's going to give us figure D. And we're rotating around this point right here, and they want to see, what does figure D look like? Now, rotations can sometimes be a little tricky to see in your head. For me personally, I actually had to use a Post-it, and I traced shape A, and then I put it over shape or image D. And so I know that this line is going to be here, and this line is going to be about here. So that's what it looks like after I turn it or after I rotate it. And so the same question, what's the same and what's different? So we're kind of catching on that it's the same size, it's the same shape. What's different? Well, it's definitely in a new location. Everything, this point right here stayed the same, but everything else moved. And then also it's facing a different way. And if you remember that vocab word, that is called orientation. So we changed the orientation. So when we look at letter C, it says a transformation describes a change in location, orientation, or size of a figure. Translations, reflections, and rotations are a special category called rigid transformations. And the reason why they are rigid is because they do not change the size or the shape. So transform means I'm going to change the shape somehow. I might make it bigger. I might make it smaller. I might move its location. I might change its orientation. But if you're going to call it a rigid transformation, that means the size and the shape do not change. So that's the big idea for today. Size and shape do not change. So for our last question, how is a rotation like a reflection and how is it different? Well, let's see. They're alike because they both will change the location. They're alike because the size and the shape stay the same. And they're different because a rotation, it turns a shape. So it's a turn. And a reflection is a flip. So that's how they are different. So that is our big idea for session 1. In the next video, we'll talk about parallel lines. And one thing I missed, they're also alike because reflections and rotations will both also change the orientation. So do not want to leave that out. They change the location and the orientation.